Have you ever felt truly invisible, despite carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders? Have you poured your heart and soul into your work, meticulously ensuring perfection, only to be met with silence, or worse, with the swift, cutting judgment that follows a single, solitary misstep? This is the story of Mara Trankner, a woman who understood the profound, aching truth of invisibility. For years, Mara had been the silent anchor of a bustling logistics firm in Bremen, a ghost in the machine of global trade. At 30, her title, documentation officer, sounded unremarkable, yet her role was anything but. She was the unseen guardian of the company's regulatory paperwork, the one who meticulously ensured every customs form, every shipping manifest, every declaration was flawless, compliant, and beyond reproach. In the chaotic, high-stakes world of international logistics, where a misplaced comma could mean millions in fines or weeks of delays, Mara was a quiet savior. She wasn't charismatic. She didn't command attention in meetings. She simply worked, her nimble fingers flying across keyboards, her sharp eyes scanning dense columns of data, her mind a vast library of regulations and tariffs. Her office, tucked away on a less trafficked floor, was a sanctuary of quiet diligence, filled with the soft hum of monitors and the rustle of papers. Mara understood that true competence often resided in the quiet places, in the unseen efforts that held everything together. Her work was a testament to dedication, a silent vow to excellence. She was the one who caught the errors others missed, who untangled bureaucratic knots before they became nooses. Yet, her flawless record, her tireless commitment, went unacknowledged. Her supervisor, Herr Dietrich, a man whose presence filled any room with bluster and self-importance, rarely even looked in her direction. To him, Mara was just another cog, a nameless functionary whose quiet efficiency simply meant she was doing her job, nothing more, nothing less. She existed in a professional vacuum, her triumphs unheard, her efforts unseen, her very presence a whisper in the echoing halls of a company that thrived on loud victories. This silence, this invisibility, was the crucible in which Mara's quiet strength was forged, but it was also the fragile glass that was about to shatter. Then came the mistake. Not a colossal error, not a catastrophic oversight, but a single, almost imperceptible typo on a customs form. It was a misplaced digit, an inverted character in a sequence of thousands, easily overlooked by anyone, especially in the relentless churn of daily paperwork. Yet, this tiny, isolated imperfection, a microscopic blemish on a canvas of immaculate precision, became the very crack through which Mara's world began to crumble. It was discovered not by a meticulous audit, but by an impatient customs officer, on a day when Herr Dietrich was under unusual pressure from above. He needed a scapegoat, a visible target for the rising tension, and Mara's almost mythical perfection had, ironically, made her the perfect candidate. Until that moment, Mara had been an abstraction to him, a silent producer of perfect paperwork. Now, suddenly, she was tangible, accountable, and, in his eyes, culpable. His eyes, which had for years passed over her without recognition, now narrowed with a singular, icy focus. The shift in his demeanor was immediate and chilling. He didn't approach her with concern, or even professional disappointment. Instead, he descended upon her desk like a predator, his voice cutting through the office's quiet hum, sharper than Mara had ever heard it. "Trankner, is this what you call accuracy? A direct violation of protocol. Do you understand the implications of such carelessness?" he boomed, holding up the offending form like a damning indictment. His tone was not corrective, it was punitive, designed to humiliate. Whispers immediately rippled through the office, heads turned, eyes darted towards Mara. The shame was immediate, searing. For years, she had been defined by her meticulousness. Now, she was defined by a single, tiny error. The public scolding became a daily ritual, a theatrical performance for Herr Dietrich's benefit, each word a chisel chipping away at Mara's self-worth. He never missed an opportunity to remind her, to remind everyone, of Trangner's little mistake. His accusations, dripping with condescension, painted her as a liability, an anchor dragging the company down instead of the diligent asset she had always been. The injustice of it all, the brutal disproportion between the minor typo and the relentless public condemnation, was a suffocating weight. The irony was a bitter pill. Only through error had she finally become visible, but it was a visibility she desperately wished she could erase. The criticisms escalated, each day bringing a fresh wave of humiliation. Herr Dietrich, emboldened by his perceived authority and Mara's quiet, non-confrontational nature, seemed to take perverse pleasure in her discomfort. His scoldings, once public, now became even more targeted, delivered with a sneer or a dismissive wave of his hand whenever she approached him with new forms, even perfectly executed ones. "Are you sure this one is correct, Trankner? We can't afford another one of your lapses," he would say, loud enough for others to hear, his words laced with sarcasm. The whispers didn't stop, they intensified, following Mara like a shadow. Colleagues who had once simply ignored her now subtly avoided eye contact, their silence a louder judgment than any spoken word. They saw her through Herr Dietrich's lens, a problem, a liability, a convenient target. Mara felt herself shrinking, physically and emotionally. Her shoulders hunched, her gaze fell to the floor, her once confident steps now hesitant and uncertain. The joy she had once found in her work, the quiet satisfaction of a task perfectly executed, evaporated, replaced by a gnawing dread each morning. Sleep became a luxury, stolen in fitful bursts, haunted by imagined criticisms and the echo of Herr Dietrich's booming voice. Her meticulously organized life began to fray at the edges. She stopped taking her usual walks during lunch, retreated further into herself, her vibrant internal world dimming under the relentless assault. The weight of being constantly under scrutiny, of having her entire professional identity reduced to a single, minor failing, was crushing. She tried to tell herself it was just a job, that it didn't define her. But when your meticulousness is your pride, and that pride is publicly stripped away, what is left? She saw herself not as a highly skilled professional, but as the woman who made the typo, the source of disdain, the object of ridicule. The injustice was not just external, it began to seep inward, corroding her sense of self-worth. The once strong foundations of her confidence began to crack, threatening to crumble entirely under the sustained, unyielding pressure. Every interaction, every glance, every silence felt like another stone added to the burden on her shoulders. The breaking point arrived not with a dramatic confrontation, but with a quiet, internal snap. It was a mundane Tuesday, no different from any other, except that the air in the office felt particularly heavy, permeated with unspoken judgment. Herr Dietrich had, that morning, presented a new, even more convoluted set of rules for filing, ostensibly designed to prevent future errors of a certain type, his gaze pointedly fixed on Mara. He then asked her, in front of several senior managers, to verbally outline the new process, knowing full well she hadn't had time to fully absorb it. Her voice, usually soft, trembled as she tried to articulate the complex steps, stumbling over a minor detail. He cut her off abruptly, a dismissive hand gesture silencing her. "See? This is precisely what I mean. A fundamental lack of comprehension. We need people who are truly on top of things, Trankner, not those who consistently demonstrate their inadequacies." His words were a public execution of her dwindling professional standing. As the managers averted their eyes, uncomfortable but silent, something inside Mara clicked. It wasn't anger. It was a profound, weary clarity. This wasn't about the typo anymore. This was about power, about control, about a man's need to diminish another to elevate himself. This relentless targeting wasn't designed to improve her performance. It was designed to break her spirit, to drive her out. And in that moment, she realized she couldn't let it. Her worth was not to be dictated by a petty tyrant, nor by the whispered judgments of colleagues too afraid to stand up. Her value, her meticulousness, her integrity were intrinsic, not granted or revoked by Herr Dietrich's cruel whims. It was a quiet epiphany, but it resonated with the force of a thunderclap within her. She walked back to her desk, not with her usual slumped posture, but with a new, almost imperceptible straightening of her spine. Her fingers, which had often trembled when facing her daily tasks, now moved with a determined resolve. She opened a new document, not a customs form, but a blank page. And there, quietly, steadily, she typed two simple yet revolutionary words. Resignation letter. Each keystroke was a small act of rebellion, a reclaiming of her dignity. The fear was still there, a faint tremor in her hands, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective instinct for her own peace of mind. She would not allow herself to be dismantled piece by piece. She would leave, not defeated, but defiant. The act of handing in her resignation was less a surrender and more a liberation. Mara walked into Herr Dietrich's office, the crisp, folded paper a shield in her hand. His eyes, usually dismissive, widened slightly in surprise as she placed it on his desk. Herr Dietrich, she began, her voice steady. I am resigning from my position as documentation officer, effective 2 weeks from today. His initial shock quickly morphed into a smug, triumphant smirk. Oh? So, you've finally decided you're not up to the task, Trankner. A wise decision, perhaps. This role requires a certain attention to detail that, regrettably, you seem to lack. He didn't even try to hide his satisfaction, his words dripping with a condescending pity that was far worse than his open hostility. He clearly saw it as his victory, the final proof that his relentless campaign had worked. He didn't ask why, he didn't offer a counter-argument, he didn't even feign disappointment. He simply signed the acknowledgement, eager to be rid of her. Mara felt a complex swirl of emotions. Relief, yes, a profound release from the daily torment, but also a raw emptiness. This job, despite its flaws, had been her steady routine, her source of purpose. Now, she was stepping into an unknown future, adrift, without the familiar moorings of her daily tasks. As she left his office, the quiet hum of the building seemed to mock her, whispering doubts into her mind. Had she made the right choice? Was she simply running away? What if Herr Dietrich was right? What if she truly wasn't good enough? These insidious questions gnawed at her, undermining the fragile confidence she had painstakingly begun to rebuild. The company, for so long a source of silent pride, now felt like a cage, yet the door was open, and she was stepping out into a vast, uncharted wilderness. She returned to her desk, the finality of her decision weighing heavily. She began the tedious process of transferring her duties, preparing handover notes, and clearing her personal effects. But as she worked, a deep-seated instinct, a habit forged over years of meticulousness, pulled at her. She needed to ensure everything was truly in order, not just for her replacement, but for her own peace of mind. It was a final, almost ritualistic desire to leave no stone unturned, to ensure that her departure was as clean and orderly as her work had always been. It was this quiet, internal compulsion that led her back to the archives, for one last, comprehensive review. Mara's final days at the firm were a blur of meticulous handover and a quiet internal countdown. As she prepared to relinquish her duties, her ingrained perfectionism compelled her to conduct one last, thorough sweep of her ongoing projects, and, more importantly, the archived shipping records. She wanted to leave a flawless legacy, even if her departure was fraught with personal pain. It was a professional courtesy, a habit, and perhaps a subconscious need to prove to herself, one last time, that she truly was as competent as she had always believed. Deep within the labyrinthine digital archives, buried beneath layers of older files, something caught her eye. It wasn't a glaring error, not at first glance, but a subtle inconsistency, a pattern that seemed slightly off. A series of seemingly disparate transactions, spread across several years, had been categorized in a way that, to her precise mind, felt irregular. It was like a single thread slightly out of place in a perfectly woven tapestry. Most would have dismissed it as a minor anomaly, perhaps an outdated coding system, or simply too much effort to investigate. But Mara, with her uncanny ability to discern the smallest deviation from the norm, felt an insistent prickle of unease. Her eyes, trained for years to spot discrepancies, picked up on the faint echo of a red flag. She pulled up the associated documentation, cross-referencing dates, destinations, and customs classifications. The deeper she delved, the clearer it became. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was a recurring, systematic misclassification of goods for a particular, highly valuable international partner. The documents, on their own, seemed benign, but when viewed in aggregate, the pattern formed a distinct, worrying picture. The immediate realization wasn't that it was a compliance violation, but that it was a potential one, a loose thread that, if pulled, could unravel something far larger. It was a gut feeling, a professional instinct honed by years of quiet vigilance. She didn't yet know the full scope, but she knew with an unsettling certainty that something was profoundly wrong, something that had been allowed to fester, unnoticed, in the company's vast and complex operations. Her heart began to pound with a mixture of dread and a fierce professional curiosity. This wasn't her job anymore, not truly. But the meticulous officer in her, the one who had always strived for absolute perfection, couldn't simply walk away from a potential unraveling. As Mara continued to pull on the thread, the full, alarming scope of the compliance violation slowly unspooled before her. What began as a subtle irregularity quickly revealed itself as a deeply entrenched, systemic misclassification of specific goods intended for a critical international partner. It wasn't merely a typo, but a deliberate, albeit cleverly concealed, circumvention of specific trade regulations over several years. The value of the goods involved was staggering, and the potential fines and legal repercussions for the firm were astronomical. The most chilling discovery was the evidence that Herr Dietrich had not only been aware of this long-overlooked issue but had actively chosen to ignore it, burying it under layers of misdirection and prioritizing short-term gains over long-term compliance. There were email exchanges, thinly veiled instructions, and documented decisions that clearly indicated his complicity, or at the very least, his gross negligence. He had gambled the company's future for convenience, for an easier path, dismissing the complex and critical work Mara and her department diligently performed. The realization was a punch to the gut. The very man who had publicly shamed her for a minor typo had himself ignored a violation that could cripple the entire firm. The dramatic irony was almost unbearable. Mara faced a moral crossroads. She was leaving. She could simply walk away, let the ticking time bomb explode long after she was gone. It wasn't her problem anymore. But the very core of her being, the integrity that had defined her meticulous work for years, rebelled against the thought. To remain silent would be to betray everything she believed in, everything she had quietly stood for. It would be to allow Herr Dietrich's carelessness, the same carelessness he had accused her of, to destroy the company she had unknowingly protected. With a newfound resolve, born from a deep sense of justice and professional duty, she made her decision. She compiled a comprehensive, irrefutable dossier of evidence, meticulously outlining the violation, the pattern, and Herr Dietrich's documented awareness. She bypassed Herr Dietrich entirely, knowing he would bury it again. Instead, she scheduled a meeting directly with the firm's corporate legal department, a move that was highly unusual for someone in her position, especially one who was on her way out. The tension in the legal department's conference room was palpable as she laid out her findings, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Their initial skepticism, born from the unlikeliness of a departing documentation officer uncovering such a major issue, slowly gave way to dawning alarm as they reviewed her meticulously presented evidence. The quiet, overlooked Mara had just dropped a bombshell, and the reverberations would be felt throughout the entire company. The meeting with corporate legal was a turning point, though its immediate aftermath was shrouded in a tense, unsettling silence. Mara had delivered her evidence with quiet conviction, and though the legal team's faces initially registered disbelief, the sheer weight of her meticulously compiled documentation soon erased any doubt. The air in the conference room had grown heavy with the unspoken gravity of her findings. She left feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and a quiet satisfaction, knowing she had done what was right, regardless of the personal cost. In the days that followed, an almost imperceptible tremor began to ripple through the upper echelons of the logistics firm. A quiet, yet intense investigation was launched by corporate legal. It moved with a stealthy efficiency, like a silent predator stalking its prey. Mara, in her final days, observed the subtle shifts. Lawyers, usually confined to their specialized floor, began appearing in various departments, their questions polite but probing. Meetings that were once open and boisterous were now conducted behind closed doors, their contents whispered rather than declared. Herr Dietrich, oblivious to the true source of the rising scrutiny, became increasingly agitated. He attributed the sudden flurry of legal activity to Mara's reckless departure, perhaps believing she had left a new, tangible mess behind. He doubled down on his public denigration of her, ironically fueling the very narrative that would later condemn him. He even tried to deflect blame onto other, lower-level employees, demonstrating a panicked desperation to control the narrative. He was a man scrambling to cover a small crack in the dam, unaware that Mara had revealed a gaping hole he himself had ignored. The whispers in the office now took on a different tone. No longer were they solely focused on Mara's typo. Now, hushed conversations revolved around audits, compliance issues, and major partners. The full scale of the problem was still unknown to most, but a pervasive sense of unease settled over the company. The illusion of business as usual was maintained, but beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Mara watched, a quiet observer of the impending reckoning. She saw the fear in Herr Dietrich's eyes, the way his bluster became more pronounced, a thin veneer over growing panic. It was a chilling testament to dramatic irony. The man who had sought to destroy her career over a minor error was now unknowingly spiraling towards his own downfall, a consequence of his own egregious negligence, brought to light by the very person he had tried to erase. The company was on the precipice, teetering on the edge of a chasm that Mara, the overlooked, had foreseen. The reckoning came swiftly and decisively. The quiet investigation by corporate legal, fueled by Mara's irrefutable evidence, culminated in a devastating outcome. The firm's biggest international partner, a cornerstone of their global operations and a significant source of revenue, announced its immediate withdrawal. The reason was clear, and it reverberated through the industry like a thunderclap: repeated, long-standing compliance violations that had gone unaddressed. The financial fallout was immediate and crippling. Stocks plummeted, contracts were suspended. The company, once a titan of logistics, now faced a crisis of monumental proportions. Reputational damage, far more insidious than monetary loss, spread like wildfire. The news hit the internal channels of the firm with the force of a tidal wave. Panic set in. Employees buzzed with a mix of shock, fear, and a desperate search for answers. It didn't take long for the truth, or at least a significant part of it, to surface. While Mara's name was never publicly announced, the company quickly confirmed that the violations had been overlooked by certain individuals in positions of responsibility, and that corrective action was being taken. This thinly veiled statement was directed squarely at Herr Dietrich. His bluster had vanished, replaced by a ghastly pallor and a palpable aura of fear. The man who had been so loud, so dominant, so quick to condemn, was now cornered, his lies and negligence exposed for all to see. The consequences for him were swift and absolute. His office, once the imposing seat of his self-proclaimed authority, now stood empty, its door ajar, echoing with silence. His name was no longer uttered in whispers of disdain, but in hushed tones of disbelief and condemnation. He was gone, erased from the company he had so carelessly endangered. It was a stark, powerful moment of dramatic irony. The man who had mercilessly persecuted Mara for a single, minor typo had been brought down by his own egregious disregard for the rules, a disregard unearthed and exposed by the very person he deemed incompetent. Mara wasn't there to witness it. She had already left, stepping out of the company's walls into her new, uncertain future. But her actions had created an undeniable seismic shift. The company now recognized the true cost of overlooking integrity, of silencing the quiet, meticulous voices in favor of loud, arrogant ones. Mara had left, but not forgotten. Her legacy was etched not in her presence, but in the glaring absence of Herr Dietrich, a silent monument to her unwavering commitment to truth and precision. Mara was no longer an employee of the logistics firm in Bremen. She was no longer defined by the quiet hum of her office or the oppressive shadow of Herr Dietrich's disdain. She had stepped into a new beginning, a world untethered from the daily torment and the suffocating invisibility. Her days were now hers to shape, her future hers to build. The quiet vindication of Herr Dietrich's downfall reached her indirectly, through hushed phone calls from former colleagues who had once averted their eyes. They spoke of the empty office, the plummeting stock, the palpable shift in the company's atmosphere, a sobering recognition of the high cost of negligence. Mara listened, a quiet sense of justice settling over her, but without triumph or malice. She hadn't acted out of revenge, but out of a deeper sense of integrity, a commitment to righting a profound wrong. Her departure, fueled by desperation, had inadvertently become the catalyst for a much-needed, if painful, cleansing within the organization. Her actions had not only exposed a critical flaw but had forced the company to confront its own blind spots, to reevaluate what truly mattered, not just profit but principles, not just showmanship, but substance. The story of the quiet documentation officer who saved the company from itself, albeit from the outside, began to circulate, a modern fable of unseen heroism. It was a testament to the fact that true worth cannot be hidden forever, that genuine competence, when coupled with unwavering integrity, will inevitably shine through, even from the deepest shadows. It reminded everyone that the most significant contributions often come from the most unassuming places, from those who work diligently behind the scenes, far from the spotlight. What unseen heroes walk among us every day? What quiet acts of genius are unfolding in the overlooked corners of our world, waiting to be acknowledged, waiting to be valued? Perhaps it is the cleaner who meticulously notices a fault in the foundation, the janitor who maintains order in chaos, the quiet colleague whose insights are always dismissed. This story is a heartfelt plea. Look closer, listen intently. Recognize the quiet strengths, the unwavering dedication, the hidden gems whose true value is only revealed when the storm hits. Do not wait for a crisis to see the worth that lies beneath the surface. Share this story. Talk about Mara Trankner, and in doing so, remind someone today that their meticulousness matters, their dedication is seen, and their quiet strength has the power to change everything. For it is in recognizing the unseen that we truly begin to see the world as it should be.